welcome to episode 300 of Cinematary. Woo. I'm your host, Zach Dennis. I'm here with
Jessica Carr,
Ash Baker,
Andrew Swafford,
Nathan Smith,
Michael O'Malley.
And in today's episode, we will be celebrating 300 episodes of the Cinematary podcast by doing our movie swap. And
woo!
Unless I'm wrong, everybody is relatively sober in this iteration, so that's good.
Yeah.
Debatable.
It's always questionable when Nathan's on a pod.
Yeah, for sure. If you can't smell it.
We haven't got to that technology yet with the podcasting, where you can smell.
You want to add in one of our film theory and chill sound effects?
Yeah, I can do that if that would make you feel better.
Yeah, because I broke my second ball.
You broke the second one too? We'll have to save that for an episode.
Yeah, now I ordered a silicone Trailer Park Boy.
Ah,
so
Canada.
Breaking days no more. I've got a Bruce Willis bong now.
Anyways.
Wow. Cinematary
After Dark, baby. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the movie selections that we have. The first one is the movie that Jessica watched, but Ash, I'm going to let you introduce it since you picked it for me.
Yeah, so I assigned Jessica to watch Twister. Classic 1996. Who cares who directed it? It's awesome.
No. Reed Ramsey is sitting at home getting very mad right now. It's Jan DeBont who made
Jan DeBont.
Jan DeBont Tourism represent. Sorry. Fucking respect the Speed King.
Sorry. Apologies to everyone everywhere. I just hadn't looked it up. It stars Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, whatever, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the man himself, who we love, who we miss, R.I.P., our king.
R.I.P. Bill Paxton too. Don't disrespect Bill Paxton.
Oh, I didn't know he was. I didn't know he was dead. Yeah. That's so sad.
You just said whatever after his name.
R.I.P. Helen Hunt. All right, well, take it away, Jessica. Jessica, how it?
There is a time limit, by the way. We're doing a 10-minute time limit for each of these.
All right, and it's starting now.
What a whirlwind of an intro, I have to say. For this.
Wow.
So I want to preface my monologue of Twister with the fact that I have only seen this movie by being in a room with my dad while he's watching it on TNT or something, and I've seen bits and pieces of it because of that. But one day I went to Universal Studios in college, and there was a ride, and it was called Twister, and I was like, hell yeah, this is gonna be an amazing ride. Can you picture a tornado ride? This is gonna be awesome. And the line, it was the summertime, so the line was super long. It was winding around the building, and the building had a giant tornado on it, and I was like, this ride is gonna be awesome. So I stand in line, and as you go through this building, there are screens everywhere. It's tube TVs, and it looks like pieces of building have come through, and cows are suspended, and it looks like the building has gone through a tornado. And then there's a tube TV, and it turns on. Every room that you go in while you're standing in line has tube TVs, and the tube TV turns on, and it says, "Hey everybody, my name's Bill Paxton, and I'm from 1996 Twister. Let me tell you about how we made this film." And so I got to see behind the scenes of this movie that I don't remember, and they were talking about getting rain just blown on them with these giant turbine fans, and just getting blasted with water, and how much of a feat it was making this movie. And I'm like, this ride is gonna be the best ride ever. It's gonna be awesome. And every room that I walked in, there was a tube TV, and he goes, "Hey guys, it's me, Bill Paxton, again."
Oh, yeah.
And it's me,
From
Helen Hunt.
1996's Twister.
From 1996 Twister. And I went through 5 rooms waiting in line, and every single time Bill Paxton was like, we've never met before, it's me, Bill Paxton, right here, we've never met each other before, this is 1996 Twister.
By the way, I just Googled this ride because I was curious, like, what year must they have built this for them to be calling attention to it being 1996's Twister? And it was 1998 that they built this ride. The ride is, by the way, is called Twister ...
Oh, hell yeah.
Ride it out.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I get to the end of this ride, and I'm like, okay, I'm about to get on this ride. It's going to blow my mind. I know who Bill Paxton is now. We've met each other like 5 times. I was like, I'm going to get on this ride. And it ends up, like, I get on this, like, stage platform thing, and in front of me, which at the time I didn't know because I hadn't seen the movie before, was the drive-in, like a replication of the drive-in that is in the film. And the wind just starts, so all these people are standing in rows, and then there's a stage, and there's a replication of the drive-in, and it's verbatim exactly like a shot from the movie. And there's like a lightning bolt hits the gas station, stuff starts sparking, a fire breaks out, and then just wind starts blowing in your face, and they spray water in your face, and then a tornado just swirls around, and they were like, thanks for coming, that was Twister, everybody, good job. And it was just them blowing wind in our faces, and I was like, I cannot believe I just stood in line this long.
Primarily, I've also been on this ride, it's primarily like a effects demonstration on how they made Twister.
They did not advertise it like that. And also, I think that I did this in like 2015. So for an audience member in 2015, I was like, big whoop. I was like, okay. I was just on a Transformers ride where I wore 3D glasses and I got to like shoot at things. I was like, this was not exciting. I cannot believe this happened. But I finally watched the movie, and I was sort of also like, big whoop. Okay, that's great. I will say, so let me get the positives out of the way. I do appreciate what it was doing for the time that it was doing it. Like, I understand.
For 1996?
It was a big... Yes, for 1996, it was a great feat. And I appreciate them showing a female scientist who's very passionate about meteorology, and she wants to, her dad got blown away, so she's like, I gotta defeat this tornado, I gotta figure out what makes it, and I gotta defeat it. And that was like her whole purpose. But the love triangle that they were trying to do.
Is the premise that they have to defeat the tornado?
They want to learn.
5 minutes.
They have sensors that go up, and they want to learn. They want to collect data so that they can learn the makeup of a tornado, so that they can warn people. So like the warning system only gives people 5 minutes before the tornado hits. So they want to make up a warning system that gives people at least 15 to 20 minutes so that they can get to shelter without dying.
They're not trying to punch the tornado or anything.
No, but honestly, like, her plot line in the film is pretty much like she wants to defeat the tornado. Like, everyone is rooting for her, like, you gotta do this for your father, you gotta defeat this tornado. It's pretty much what it's like. But her romance with Bill Paxton just overshadows what I think the film is trying to do, which is, when you love something, when you're passionate about it, it overtakes your entire world. And these two people are trying to be in a relationship when all they really care about are tornadoes. So, like, they can't make their relationship work, but for some reason, whoever wrote this decided to write in a love triangle where Bill Paxton he wants to divorce Helen Hunt's character, but he brings in his new girlfriend to, like, hunt tornadoes with them because he's trying to get her to sign the divorce papers. But, like, that lady, she almost gets killed by like 3 tornadoes in a row because Bill Paxton is dragging her around, and he ends up, obviously, he's still in love with Helen Hunt, and he's like holding her during the tornadoes, and this other lady is just in the car with Philip Seymour Hoffman, like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I guess I'm gonna see some tornadoes. And they try to do a love triangle thing, but it's like a love triangle where the other person has zero chance.
Is it trying to ape Jurassic Park a little bit? Also in Jurassic Park, you have like scientific professionals who are in a relationship, but they have like commitment issues. And
it's funny you say that, Andrew, because the writer of Jurassic Park wrote Twister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it felt a lot like Jurassic Park, because whenever, even just the way that it was filmed, it felt a lot like Jurassic Park. But so anyways, the love triangle is meaningless. The lady, I felt really bad for her because she had no chance. Like, Bill Paxton is making sex eyes at Helen Hunt the entire time. So she had zero chance. She almost got killed by 3 tornadoes for no reason. Second thing, so what I didn't like about this movie is that, and also they spent all of their money on the Twister effects, because the soundtrack is like royalty-free music, and it is awful. It is absolutely terrible. There is a shot of a satellite in the sky, and it looks like clip art because they couldn't use any money. They couldn't use any of their money on that.
Wait, the person who composed the music for this movie also composed the music for Moana and Tarzan.
It's bad. It's not good. There's a part where they're trying to show...
Wait, Phil Collins?
No. So that's like the songs in Tarzan, but this is the composer, yeah.
So they're trying to show the demolition and like all of the houses that are torn up and families gathering together and how sad that is, but they try to like meld baby cries in with the score, and it sounded very cheesy and very bad. I did not like it. But ending on a positive note, like Twister, there are 2 dogs in Twister, and they save them. They save both of these sweet, precious dogs, and that is good. It is the cows, on the other hand, they do not get saved, but the dogs survive. And also, rest in peace, rest in power, Bill Paxton and Philip Seymour Hoffman. They did a really good job in this movie, and that's all I've got to say.
Sounds like the real tornado was Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt's relationship. That was the real Twister.
It's Bill Paxton from 1996's Twister.
It's him.
Ash, tell us
Bill
why
Paxton, star
you
of
picked...
Big Love.
Tell us why
Great
you
show.
picked Twister for Jessica, Ash.
Twister was always on the cable television when I was growing up, and I loved it. I was simultaneously terrified of tornadoes, and I was obsessed with them. And I loved Twister. It scared me, but I loved to watch it, and I've always loved it. It's just a beloved movie, I think it's great.
It is one of those like quintessential like cable Sunday afternoon movies.
Yeah.
Like it's like that canon of
TNT
film.
canon.
Yeah, it's a must-see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A TNT classic.
we got a couple TNT classics on this list.
We've done also like we have TNT classics in our backlog too. We did Air Force One.
Air Force One.
My movie's a big TNT classic. I'm just saying.
Yours is more of an FX classic, I think.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Or like Spike.
Yeah.
We got the movies.
TV. Yeah.
That's FX's slogan is "We've got the movies." Just a statement.
Wait, is that really their slogan?
Yeah.
They're like the Arby's of movies.
Cutting edge. They don't really have that many. They're pivoted.
Arby's of channels. We've got the meat and we've got the movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what movies are. They're just a slab of meat. Of plastic.
We're only 30 minutes into this podcast.
Just wait till we get to
there.
Tampopo.
Oh my god. I can't get to... We're all slabs of meat. I don't have time for that. It's too early.
So when Jessica requested Ash give her a movie, Jessica asked for, like, give me an Ash brand movie. And I think what she was expecting was the movie that Zach picked for Ash.
I thought that I was going to get something spicy.
Nah.
So,
I'm so sorry to disappoint.
You just got something really windy.
I think that I front as someone like very spicy, but actually I'm just like a bland potato.
just a tornado. You're just a tornado on the inside.
Yeah.
No, I had Ash, and I was like, what do they want to see? And then I was like, well, let's look at the last probably 3 months of Cinematary that they've been on. And my conclusion was they're going to want something horny. So I went with Basic Instinct because I literally went to your Letterboxd watch list and was like, where's a horny movie that's on here that you haven't seen? And this one was like, yeah, this is right up there. So 1992's Basic Instinct. Ash, I'm going to leave it to you to intro that.
Yes. So Basic Instinct, 1992, Paul Verhoeven. It's my Letterboxd review says Hitchcock with lesbians, which, I mean, that's basically, I think, what sums it up. There's like...
Can I interject really quickly before we get too far away from Paul Verhoeven as a director? I think one of the very first times I ever hung out with Ash, it was me, Nathan, and Ash watching Showgirls by Paul Verhoeven.
Yes.
And Ash gave that movie a half star on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
And it was a contentious evening. But anyways.
That was really awkward. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a weird way to introduce yourself to somebody.
It is.
Let's watch Showgirls.
But I feel like you should revisit that movie.
No, I think if I watched it again, I would definitely like it a lot more. I think at the time, I was both A, in a weird situation, and B, like, kind of in a prudish, like, mindset. And so I was like...
There's a ridiculous amount of nudity in that movie.
Yeah. I kept thinking after I watched this movie, Basic Instinct, about the epic pool sex scene in Showgirls.
Oh yeah.
How could you not think about it?
Because Paul Verhoeven, he just has his way with sex scenes. Everyone is so like, I don't know. Everyone's just like really freaked out, kind of.
I paused the timer because we're not even talking about the movie that we're supposed to at this point.
Jessica talked about a theme park ride for like 6 minutes of it.
Hey, theme parks are cinema.
Sorry, Ash. Go ahead.
It was relevant,
This is relevant
to the movie.
Theme park cinema, baby.
So
All right, I'm
yeah,
resuming.
so this movie was like, well, first I gotta say it was like a real trip watching it, and there being so many like faces that I recognized in it. To like the main stars are Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone and Jean Triplehorn, but you have people like Mitch Pileggi, who plays Skinner on The X-Files, and you have James Rebhorn, who has been in literally everything. He's just the old guy in everything. He's usually a cop. And then you have Stephen Tobolowsky, who's just an epic nerd. You have Wayne Knight, Newman. There's just like a lot of great people in this movie. But yeah.
Is there a Newman sex scene?
No, there's no Newman sex scene.
Damn.
But we start and basically finish on a sex scene. Just bookend that bitch. we have a great
Oh man.
we have a great
I want that on a pillow.
we have a great scene in like this like 90s like gay San Francisco dance club, and it's like neon lights and gays and leather and fishnet, and we're dancing and we're doing coke in the bathroom, and we're loud music, and there's this great moment where Sharon Stone is dancing with her girlfriend, because Sharon Stone is gay as hell in this movie, and she's dancing with her girlfriend and this gay guy, and then Michael Douglas comes in casual Friday wearing like a V-neck sweater with nothing under it, and he comes in and he's like, you know, walking like seductively up to Sharon Stone, bisexual queen, and Sharon Stone like comes over and starts like, you know, like flirt dancing with Michael Douglas, and Sharon Stone's girlfriend Roxy and this gay guy are doing like this angry dancing while they're like watching Sharon Stone dance with Michael Douglas, and it's just such an epic scene. Like that would be me, like just angry dancing while my hot girlfriend is like kissing a straight guy at the gay bar. But there's like, it is kind of like a Hitchcock movie though. There's like it's in San Francisco. It's very Vertigo feel. Sharon Stone's character has a couple of very like Hitchcock blonde outfits. There's like I guess the famous scene or whatever I'd actually seen on the internet before, like just floating around Twitter one time, the scene where like her vulva is like exposed.
I think that's what most people know about this movie if they have not seen this movie.
So there's that scene, and I was actually also I watched this movie with my friends who I have been quarantined with, and the way that one of my friends gasped aloud when she uncrosses her legs. It was appalling. So I was reading that she had no idea that her vulva would be filmed on in the movie, and that.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah, so apparently Paul Verhoeven was like, your underwear are too shiny, please take them off.
Oh, no.
And she was like, oh, they're too shiny? Okay. And she took them off. And so
5 minutes.
he like filmed, okay. So he like filmed it, and she was like, and she like slapped him in the face when she saw it. But Paul Verhoeven's like, nah, she definitely knew. But anyway, I really enjoyed this movie. Apparently there were like, at the time that it came out, there were like a ton of like gay and lesbian and women protesters to it, saying that it was like homophobic and sexist because like all the villains are bisexual and women. And I would just like to say that is some second wave fucking identity politics bullshit. This movie's great.
Oh my god.
Calm your asses down. I ride with the bisexual femme fatale gay Hitchcock shit. Drop mic.
You don't let anybody get in your way.
Follow your instincts.
Yeah,
you know?
thank you.
Zach, have you even seen
your
this
most
movie?
basic ones?
The most basic of them.
No, I solely went off.
Oh my god,
This
Zach,
seems horny enough.
You have to watch it. It's so good.
You're not doing your due diligence, Zach.
I haven't
know.
seen the movie that I
Well,
picked for Zach, so I would not want to hold him to a standard I don't want myself held to.
No, you're sure. No, we should do that, guys. We should do that.
I think the
Everyone-
rule I think the rule should be it's reciprocal, and you have to go watch.
You mean
The one you
you can't just
recommended.
like curse someone with a movie chore like I did for Zach?
I guess you didn't watch.
You can, but then
the
you've
Love
gotta
Guru.
pay the piper.
Yeah.
you didn't
So you're
watch The
saying
Love
that
Guru.
like I've seen The Love Guru, you know? I've experienced that around the same time that I was seeing my movie, 2006's 300. Because this is the 300th episode, and we're just hilarious.
That's the only introduction that I was gonna give. So, you take it away.
Yeah. Well. All right.
Also,
I'm gonna start
it's
the timer.
maybe worth mentioning that today is the day that news broke that the Snyder cut of Justice League is officially being
Hell
released
yeah.
next year.
4 hours, baby, of premium streaming content. 6-part
HBO
miniseries.
Max.
You know that. It seems like a perfect format to, something called HBO Max seems like the right place to be putting Zack Snyder content, quite honestly. All right, I'm going to hit the timer because HBO Max is where 300 will most likely end up. 300 came out in 2006 and it just started a wave of just asshole. Well, it didn't start a wave of asshole guys, but it gave them a new mantra in life, which is to be like the Spartans. But this is based not necessarily. I mean, it's vaguely based on the historical event from 480 BC, where the 300 Spartans, along with their king Leonidas, tried to stave off the invading Persians into mainland Greece, and they did that by kind of setting up in this little kind of mountain corridor so that even though there were millions and millions of troops from the Persians, they had to kind of filter them through this pass. And so historically, not really, kind of a blip on the entire like the war of that period in time. The Persians kind of rolled through the Spartans and it was kind of a hiccup, and then the Athenians used it as a rallying cry to get the rest of Greece together in order to fight the Persian army. It was not like in 300 where it was you had these chiseled men, including Michael Fassbender and Gerard Butler, who are oiled up and ready to fight.
Fassbender's in this?
But this is
Yeah.
Michael Fassbender is in this and is trying a lot of stuff. But this is based on the graphic novel by Frank Miller, who people might know from like Sin City and Batman, The Killing Joke, I think is him. I don't know. Something Batman related.
Also,
Batman.
The
Year
Dark Knight
One
Returns.
and Batman.
The
Year
Dark Knight
One.
Returns.
And The Dark Knight Returns is the one that everybody points to say Batman is fascist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
and Batman
perfectly
Year
in line.
One is basically like the inspiration for Batman Begins, and
Yeah.
he sort of like, I think, reshaped the whole idea of like what Batman was, and is the kind of urtext for Nolan's take on him too.
Yeah. And you can kind of see just this one very much is invoking like a lot of the graphic novel stuff. I mean, it feels kind of, it's not nearly as cartoonish as something like Speed Racer, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. This one is more like in this kind of gritty, dark, kind of almost comic book panel style to an extent. That's kind of the visual style that director Zack Snyder takes. But like I said, Gerard Butler's in it. Lena Headey, who I remember her being in this before she was in Game of Thrones, where she's probably more well known. You got McNulty from The Wire. Dominic West is in this. He's a nasty little traitor. And he gets stabbed, and then he spills over his money, and his money has the face of Xerxes, and then all the Spartans are like, traitor, because he has the money with the other guy's face on it, which I found very entertaining. You also have, like I said, Michael Fassbender, and then just a bunch of just shirtless white dudes from the UK who are just here to be beef. Kind of, I don't know. This almost is a hornier movie than Basic Instinct, quite honestly. This is a homoerotic
Well, you wouldn't
epic.
know.
Already on the watch list.
So, yeah. So pretty much this is all it is this battle. You kind of open it up with Leonidas, who's played by Gerard Butler. They go through his history of how he became a tough man. He killed a wolf. And when you kill a wolf, I guess in 480 in BC Spartan times, that makes you a king. So he becomes the king of Sparta. He has his I'm gonna describe this as a bro would in 2006. So you got Leonidas, just like cool ass, hell yeah, kick ass, epic dude. Then you have his kick ass hot wife, who is also kind of feeding him, how to help him run this country, which is not a country. Sparta is just a city in the region of Laconia, but whatever. And then these Persian messengers come by, and the Persian messengers are like, hey, Xerxes is coming. He's about to like really have a really terrible time here in Sparta, so you might want to do something. And Leonidas is like, hell nah, I'm not doing that. And then you get the iconic, this is Sparta, and kicks the guy into the pit. Then you go up and you have this half-naked oracle woman who, in these ugly goblin things from the Lord of the Rings, who tell him, no, you're not allowed to go to war, but they're also getting a little money on the side because capitalism, am I right? And so he ignores that. He goes to war, and then you get about an hour and a half of some deeply xenophobic warfare between a glisteningly white just Aryan brotherhood of Spartans facing a rather brown microcosm of racism, just all different microcosms of racism. So
yeah, aren't there also some real questionable sexual politics in this movie too? I've heard about a rape scene that is very poorly handled. Yeah.
There's a lot of questionable politics about this movie. I'm trying to think about the rape scene. Yeah, you have this orgy scene as well. You have this like sex scene between Leonidas and his wife. But you have this rape where Dominic West's character is like trying to portray his political dominance over Leonidas's wife, and then that leads to the money comes out, and she's or he's exposed as a traitor, and that's after she stabs him. But yeah, there's this kind of quick scene where it kind of seems like a prototype for her role in Game of Thrones, where she's taking part in a very questionable sexual scene. So there is that. There's a lot of just kind of inklings of fascism in this. It's kind of interesting because this comes out in 2006, and it does lead to it kind of has this pop culture moment to an extent, because while Zack Snyder goes on to direct like the Batman versus Superman, Justice League, as well as like Watchmen and Sucker Punch and all this stuff,
but there's also like Clash of the Titans
Immortals.
and Troy. What was the other one?
Immortals.
You just kind of have like this
Immortals.
revisionist.
Person
I don't know that
Sing.
one.
Yeah, this kind. Well,
The
this
Swords
kind
and
of like,
Sandals revival.
yeah, the Swords
Yeah.
and Sandals kind of like fantasy history revival, where it's kind of using like I read this interesting piece about kind of all of the different connections to fascism that are found through how people interpret this battle that happened, thousands of years ago. It's kind of interesting because despite like what Frank Miller's graphic novel or just kind of the myth of this battle was, the Spartans, I mean, they were well renowned in the Greek world for like their warfare and such, but they also were losing a bunch. They weren't as tactical as you would like to believe, and so like this happens, and like I said, it happens, and then what they think is more the Athenians took the story of this and again like used it as propaganda in order to rally up the rest of Greece against the Persians, which already kind of has like this kind of questionable connotation to it, because you have again like this very Aryan group of men, even though they're Greek for whatever reason, this very Aryan group of men against these foreign invaders, and it really like you have just these brawny, they're hardly wearing any clothes. They have like a cape and like these booty shorts on, and then they got their sword and their shield and their helmet. And then you have the Persians, and it's Persia as well as like all of these various armies from Asia at this period of time, and you have like Xerxes, who is very kind of androgynous and has like these earrings and these tattoos and these like rings all over his finger. And like I said, they go through this orgy sequence, and you have all of these like various like you have a guy with like a goat head, and it's all of these, it's like they threw all of these taboos all into this like one location. And so you're kind of there is just kind of this base level myth making gear that it's working out, where you have it's very clear like this the them versus us mentality that it's kind of establishing through this thing. And it is kind of, I mean, it's difficult to not be wrapped up into it, because I'm not a giant Zack Snyder fan by any stretch. I mean, I'm trying to think. There's not really one that I mean, Watchmen's another one where I saw it at the time, and I probably should watch it again, in 2020. But this one for sure, like, there is something interesting just about the visual style, because it does work on this yeah, I know. It does work on
first person to break his time limit.
I know. This is what 300 does to you. It does kind of utilize this kind of comic book aesthetic in a way that is pretty interesting. I mean, I didn't find it as interesting as like Speed Racer and how it kind of uses the cartoon comic effect to it. But I mean, you think of like, you have this, and you have things like, I mean, another Frank Miller, Sin City, in the way that Robert Rodriguez directs that.
Have you seen The Warriors?
Yeah.
His movie The Spirit.
Yeah, The Spirit. You just kind of have like these himself. It's like merging that kind of comic book tile aesthetic into like a moving image. That is pretty interesting. I mean, you like, there's the way that Snyder like utilizes like this kind of slow-mo effect and the silhouetting of things. I mean, it like the visuals of it are very interesting. But I also find him to be a director that is constantly flirting with fascist ideologies, and is never somebody to, I mean, like I was telling Michael before, Frank Miller was like, yeah, I'm pretty aware of like the fascist connections to the Spartan Leonidas myth. I mean, you have all of these alt-right, right-wing groups that, I mean, as far back as like, I mean, even before, the obvious like historic example of like the Nazis, who use this Latin term Molin Labe, which means come and take it, as like a moniker, a cry. I mean, you have like a American colonel during the American Revolution who yells it at the British who are trying to take over Fort Morris. You have the, Texan settlers who are yelling it at the Mexican army as it comes over. I mean, it is this kind of battle cry for the alt-right.
I usually see it on bumper stickers. I see it on bumper stickers with like a semi-automatic gun silhouette.
Exactly, and so
them.
Frank Miller is like, yeah, like I'm aware of that, but pretty much his assessment was, if you look through history, there are these kind of like admirable democratic leaders, but it seems like you need a little fascism, just a little sprinkle, and just a little sprinkle of it to get things done. And so Zach's not. Yeah, because they lose, They lose. And so I just don't feel like Zack. The last thing is I just don't feel like Zack Snyder's like. I'm sure he is aware of it, but he's not somebody who like, he just kind of wants to leave it there, and I don't think you can do that, at least in my opinion.
Well, worth mentioning that before the Snyder Cut became a thing, and before the announcement of his Netflix movie Army of the Dead, he was attached to direct an adaptation of The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And also worth mentioning that one of Frank Miller's most recent books is this comic called Holy Terror, which he originally wanted to write as a Batman comic called Holy Terror Batman, where Batman was going to fight Al-Qaeda. And because he couldn't get DC's permission to print that title, it's, a sort of Batman-ish mercenary vigilante superhero taking on an Al-Qaeda-ish terrorist group. So, that makes it kind of makes it pretty plain what's going on in that dude's head, I think.
And that's what I think. Like at this again, I'll commend him visually. It at least is something. I think it's become kind of a boring aesthetic because of the popularity of something like this, that it like people kind of mimicked it and kind of lost its mystique a little bit. But as like the first instance of this kind of comic book tile thread aesthetic, it is like, that is a visually interesting touchstone. But other than that, it's just kind of it's just fodder for the people who were clamoring for a goddamn Snyder cut anyway. So I don't know. I just leave it for FX. Quite honestly, just leave it for FX. So all right, well, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we got our next 3 movies after this. So stick with us.
Hey, Cemetery listeners, Andrew here. At the midpoint of this week's episode, I want to direct you to some of the non-podcasty things we have to offer. First, if you're a fan of what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. For $5 a month, you get 3 things: a shout out at the end of every episode, the opportunity to choose a movie we cover on the show, and our Patreon exclusive podcast, Film Theory and Chill, in which we look at a piece of theory once a month, deconstruct it, and then just chill out, talking about whatever else we have going on. All Patreon support goes solely to paying our writers for their reviews that go up on our website every Monday. Also, at the bottom of Cinematary.com, you can sign up for our free newsletter. Every Sunday, we send out an email with the latest podcast episode, Patreon content, and written reviews. This is perfect for those who want to keep tabs on what's happening, but might be too busy to see the posts when they go up. Before I go, one more quick thing. The easiest thing you can do to support us is to give Cinematary a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the show. This is quick, free, easy, and we will read your review out on the show once we get it. To recap, consider donating to our Patreon, sign up for the free newsletter, and please give us a rating and review. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 300. Let's move it along with our next pick. We have so much crap in our chat.
Ooh, keep it going.
I have to scroll up.
Me.
I'm going to toss it over to
So the movie that
Nathan and Andrew.
You can introduce it, yeah.
This is a movie that blew my little old mind when I saw it last year. A film, a forgotten film, but once you see it, it's unforgettable, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It is Warren Beatty's Bullworth, one of the wildest political satires I believe I've ever seen. Maybe one of the best, honestly, kind of, American presidential, electoral sort of satires. That's a genre that I feel like had a big moment in the 90s. And this is one of for sure, the strangest, most unhinged, and most radical, I think, of those movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Our third 90s movie of episode 300. I don't know what
Very
we were
90s
all,
cable.
what vibe we were all on, but yeah. So as Nathan alluded to, this is a presidential campaign, political, not a presidential campaign. He's actually a running for Senate, right?
Right. Yeah.
Bullworth is running for Senate, but it's a political satire about a Democratic politician named J. Billington Bullworth, who is running for re-election in the Senate. This is as Bill Clinton is also running for the presidency, and it's kind of a foregone conclusion that he's going to win it. There's not a lot of political expediency or urgency among the electorate, and he's just kind of phoning in his Senate campaign. The first scene is really great. You see him in his office after dark watching
all of these different takes of campaign ads that he's done. It's just him saying slight variations on the same thing over and over and over. And they're all mostly kind of empty sentiment, like not really meaning much of anything, like we're standing on the precipice of a new millennium. But he also is throwing in some coded reactionary racist stuff about needing to oppose affirmative action programs and things like that. And also the camera is kind of scanning around his office, and you're seeing all these photographs that he's hung up of people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks. And you get the idea that this is someone who maybe at one point had sincere political and anti-racist convictions, but has just kind of been subsumed in the political machine, and has played the game so long that he's lost any sense of genuine care or concern for why he's doing what he's doing. And all of these little audio snippets of him talking on these commercials, all these different takes of the commercial, start to blur into one another and stack on top of each other, and there just becomes this big cloud of dialogue. And we later find out that he hasn't slept in like 5 days. And the next day, the movie takes place in a very short amount of time, maybe somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. And we see him basically crack at a couple of in-person fundraisers and speaking engagements, things like that. But we also learn before he goes to some of these speaking engagements that he's suicidal, and he has hired a hitman to assassinate himself because he wants it to look like murder. He's taken out this big life insurance policy, and he wants to make sure his wife, who he's estranged from, and his daughter, who we never see, get is it $10 million at the event of his death?
Absurd amount of money like that.
Yeah, we see him haggle with the life insurance guy to make sure he gets the full $10 million. We also see him in a backroom, like dark money deal with a health insurance provider, or a CEO of a health insurance company who's essentially paying him in a health insurance policy to vote against a bill that would lead to health insurance companies having to give more policies to poor people and predominantly African American people. And we see that guy go on a long rant of like, I'm not racist, but, and then proceed to, list off this laundry list of like coded racist ideas and stereotypes of people he does not want to be selling health insurance to. So we see Bullworth start to crack. We see him as revealed as this very corrupt politician, and as a guy who thinks he doesn't have a whole lot of time left on this earth. He just kind of stops caring about the optics of the things that he says. And the most memorable scene here is him speaking to like a historic African American church, and he basically tells them that he doesn't care about them and he isn't going to vote on any policy that's going to help them because he's in the pocket of big business. And if the black church had millions of dollars to hand his way under the table, he would help them out, but that's just not how the game is played. And then at one point somebody in the audience stands up and says, so you mean the Democrats don't really care about the African American community? And he says, isn't it obvious? And this is a very and like, I guess the big high concept, before I start to get into parallels to where we're at right now, the big concept is that as he starts to crack, he
he is pursued by a character played by Halle
5
Berry
minutes.
and a couple of friends or co-workers of hers, who, and we later find out that Halle Berry has some nefarious purposes for following Bullworth, but he kind of gets taken with their black slang and the rap music that gets played at a club that they take him to.
He smokes weed too.
He smokes weed. He starts like playing with a turntable.
Oh my God.
Doing some amateur DJing. But he starts to like just out of pure like naive curiosity, like starts to speak in rhyme, trying to mimic the rap music that he's heard at this club and trying to appropriate some of this language that he's starting to pick up on. And most of the movie is just like Bullworth doing various speaking engagements and doing different interviews and live TV appearances and things like that. And he just the rap persona, he takes on this rap persona that becomes more and more outsized as the film goes on. I mean, it's always very embarrassing. Like, Warren Beatty is a very bad rapper, and I think he knows he is a bad rapper. He becomes slightly better over the course of the film as he kind of falls deeper and deeper into the persona, but it's a really embarrassing performance that Warren Beatty wrote and directed for himself. I saw a review from Mike D'Angelo criticizing the movie for being like an ego trip on Bullworth's on Warren Beatty's part, of like positioning him as this hyper woke politician who just tells it like it is. But it's also like he does not come across looking cool as he is delivering these messages.
It's the most like how do you do fellow kids performance of all time, and he
absolutely,
and he totally knows that too. Like, you know, I don't know. That's the like annoying thing about that kind of Mike D'Angelo criticism, because I feel like there's a very negative way that you could read this movie where you're saying like, oh, you know, this guy's like, Bullworth is doing all this cultural appropriation, and like, you know, spoiler alert, of like inevitably he gets assassinated in the end. And so you could say like, oh, you know, it's Warren Beatty trying to like put himself on the level of MLK and Malcolm X. But really, I think what the movie's doing is like, you know, he finally realizes, you know, he is a vessel for like whatever ideas, you know, there are in the world. And so far he's just been a vessel for big business and insurance and these private interests. And so then he, you know, totally flips the script and goes in the other direction and becomes a literal vessel for all of these just like various black people that he meets throughout the movie. You know, he kind of...
We see him parroting the exact words that Halle Berry's character says to him at one point. We also see Don Cheadle, who plays like this drug kingpin, go on this long rant about how the political establishment isn't working for him and the education system is just like setting people up to fail. And we see him say those exact words on live television. So like the things that he ends up saying are actually really smart for the most part. This is I think fair to say, an explicitly leftist movie.
I mean, he literally says socialism, you know, at that one great moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's one of the best scenes is like his first long rap where he raps about all of the donors that are in the room that he's giving a speech in, and he talks about the health insurance companies and he talks about the oil companies, that kind of culminates in him saying like, well, we have to like keep we have to keep offering people these like this false hope and these like self-defeating half measures, because we wouldn't want to give them the actual solution, which is say it with me, the bad word socialism, which I don't know, it's a really interesting political text, and there's some serious parallels to the 2020 presidential race between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, especially as like
as concerns the like African American voting demographic, which voted predominantly for Joe Biden, and there's been a lot of discourse about like whether or not people who support Bernie are like discounting the voices of the African American community and things like that. But that, I mean, to go back to that scene where he's talking to the historically black church after he says like, isn't it obvious the African American or Democratic Party doesn't care about African American community? He says, well, what are you gonna do? Vote Republican? Vote for the party who's like outwardly hostile, outwardly like out to get you. So I think there's definitely a lot to elucidate on here that I am now out of time to talk about regarding like how like the relationship between the Democratic Party and the African American community, and how much of it is just kind of like settling into what is perceived to be the only safe option, but is actually not offering that much in terms of like substantial aid compared to the alternative, which is definitely objectively worse, but not helpful. Anything else I have not talked about, Nathan, that we should touch on before we move on?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, to your point about its sort of resonance with the 2020 election, I also feel like this movie hit a lot harder for me rewatching it pretty recently, as opposed to seeing it last year, just with kind of everything that happened with Bernie Sanders and his complete shutout by the corporate media, because there's just like this scene towards the end of Bullworth where he goes on television for this like election night panel, and he starts talking about how the news companies are in the same pocket of all of these companies that he's also in the pocket of, and they shut down the broadcast. They turn off the lights, they stop filming, and it just felt like a literal sort of extreme version of what happened with Bernie, where like this guy is speaking the truth and putting the fire to the interest of corporate media, and then they just totally shut him out.
And of course, Bernie always positioned himself as much softer and more polite than we see Bullworth as here, even though he was kind of framed as like the shouty, grouchy old man. His rhetoric around like revolution was always like not true like revolutionary rhetoric. It was just kind of like to sell an idea. But if he was to actually be as coarse and as like truly confrontational as Bullworth is here, I have no doubt that the lights would maybe get shut off in the middle of one of those debates.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I also think it's a movie with kind of just like an interesting political afterlife, because towards the end of his second term, it was reported that Obama wistfully talked about his desire to go Bullworth and just like totally break face and say whatever he wanted to, which did not ever really happen. It doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. And also, not too long after this movie came out, and sort of actually even while it came out and before that, Warren Beatty had been sort of floated as a perennial potential Democratic Party presidential candidate. There's actually a Newsweek cover from 2000 that has like The Outsiders, and it's pictures of Donald Trump, Jesse Ventura, and Warren Beatty, who were all floated as potential presidential candidates in that election. And, of course, we all know how Trump turned out, and Jesse Ventura is eyeing a presidential run in 2020. And Warren Beatty, who knows? I mean, he did 2 movies this century after Bullworth.
Also, one
Club the Oscar.
True. One more thing about Bullworth before we move on. I think it's worth dwelling on the plot point where Bullworth's campaign manager is trying to what is the way to phrase this? Put out all these fires that he's kind of setting for himself in the press, but then does an about face when he realizes that the electorate is actually responding positively to him. That they
they're finally relieved to see a politician talking like a normal person, quote unquote, telling it like it is, which I think is one of the really dangerous or like upsetting things about the Trump presidency, right? Because Trump was able to tap into this populist sentiment. Everybody could say, oh, well, he talks just like us. He tells it like it is, because of his speech, his language, his mannerisms, when the substance of what he's saying doesn't really like have a connection with that, which but you could make a contrast with what Bullworth is doing here, or what Bernie Sanders did in 2020, and was not able to bring it all the way. But anyways, depressing but wild movie. Everyone should watch it. I think everyone on this podcast would very much enjoy it. But that's Bullworth.
Yeah. Michael, you finally got Nathan to watch a animated movie, so good for you.
So, yeah, in our chat where we suggested movies, Andrew shared, I guess, like a tweet.
It was a TikTok.
Nathan or it was a TikTok. Yeah, you're right. That was where he indicated every time someone made him watch an animated movie, it felt like infantile.
Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
Like the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
Let's please insert that TikTok audio in this episode.
Oh my God, it's this kid, this like middle schooler who seems to have some kind of like speech impediment, but also has a like New Jersey accent, and he's going off about how his teacher makes them watch the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and he's like, it's for babies, like. And I was like, this is how it feels every time I've been like told to watch something like Ernest and Celestine, sorry, and then just like fucking hated, honestly, the experience of watching it.
So anyway, I thought, you know who else hated Mickey Mouse? Ralph Bakshi.
You won't believe what's so stupid, right? Literally, my teacher makes us watch a video of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Are you kidding me? That is the most weirdest shit to ever watch. What am I, a 2-year-old? No, I'm a freaking teenager. Like, only babies watch that shit because it's for younger kids.
So there you go.
That's my feeling.
Yeah, so anyway, I was like, Ralph Bakshi really hated infantile Disney shit too, so I'm going to recommend Heavy Traffic, which is Ralph Bakshi's like second or third feature film. After his success with Fritz the Cat, which is about like animal people having sex and stuff, and this one stars real people, so it's not quite as outre, but Nathan,
I mean, it's a pretty interesting film. You know, I have not seen all of Fritz the Cat. I saw about 20 or 30 minutes, like my freshman year of college, early into me discovering the pleasures of marijuana, and like still getting very like paranoid, stoned in those days. And I was at a friend's house and somebody just was like, whoa, what if we watch Fritz the Cat? And they threw it on, and it was just a little bit too much for me to take in that state. Just pretty overwhelming, a lot going on, a lot of disturbing shit, you know, animal sex, as you mentioned. And I remember some like swastikas and penises and all those good things. And I, when I was a lot younger, I saw his Lord of the Rings movie, which I always remembered being like pretty creeped out by.
It's freaky.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, one of those things. I think this kind of happened probably with a lot of young folks in the early 2000s, where you were like, I want to watch The Lord of the Rings, and you like go to the video store and you like rent that on accident. But I mean, it's a pretty his animation style is like so distinctive, and obviously feels very indebted to like underground comics of the time. But it's just like really fucking nuts to see that aesthetic on screen, because I'm actually like a pretty, not so actively anymore, but back in the day I was a pretty huge kind of comics nerd, and never really got into R. Crumb or like the really sort of extreme stuff, but read a lot of like Harvey P. Carr and that kind of alternative comics sort of bent of the time. And those comics and graphic novels, as maybe problematic as they are pretty interesting, just because, I mean, the interesting thing about like any sort of animated drawn medium is just the sort of limitless potential to live out any kind of fantasy. And R. Crumb and Ralph Bakshi and these kinds of artists really take that to its most like extreme depraved lengths of like putting the most absurd, repressed, like Freudian nightmares on screen. And I don't know, it's like it feels pretty distinctive and unlike really a lot of other animated movies, at least that I've seen. I mean, it's interesting too to sort of think about this movie as like an animated compatriot, I guess, to the new Hollywood movement. It's distributed by American International Pictures, who, Roger Corman worked for, and they did all sorts of, gritty exploitation independent films. And this is like very much sort of in the style of like, a live action movie of that time. I don't know, something like Sweetback's Badass Song that's like very violent and sexual, but also sort of visually experimental. This is just like the cartoon version of that. And it was kind of crazy because I didn't know going in that there was going to be this sort of incorporation of live action footage and some, I don't know, just like a different animation techniques. There's some really interesting footage in the beginning set in this like pinball alley, looking at these screens and pinball machines, which almost have this sort of animated look to them. And then it's just this sort of like weird fucked up romp through like New York City. And it strangely feels of a piece of movies of that time, like something even like News from Home, maybe, or a little bit later, this Jean-Michel Basquiat movie Downtown 81, where it's just like, hey, like here's sort of the decay and sadness of Manhattan in this time. Like, let's just explore these nooks and crannies and strange occurrences that happen in the city. And this movie is like also a weird sort of parody of The Godfather, because it follows this cartoonist who I assume is kind of maybe based off Bakshi himself, who's named Michael Corleone, and his dad is this like washed up, not really a mafioso, wannabe mafioso, who's just like slovenly, philandering, abusive, and Michael's mother is Jewish and is just sort of this like stereotype of the uptight, blue-haired, middle-aged Jewish lady who's just constantly berating everyone in her life. And they're just always trying to kill each other. And then Michael gets hooked up with this bartender that he's friendly with, and she's like gets fired, and so he becomes her pimp. And then there's this whole thing with this like trans person trying to cruise and pick up somebody in a bar, and then they get beaten almost to death, and there are all these just like, kind of vagrants and homeless people, and a lot of sort of uncomfortable, exaggerated sort of racial stereotypes and parodies, but it also feels very much of that sort of like hippie-ish mentality of the 60s and 70s, where it's like, oh, equality is like making fun of everybody, like everybody in this movie is kind of a horrible, disgusting, disturbing stereotype, and really nobody walks away very kindly. But there's just like not really, I don't know, it's just like this sort of ambling plot, and basically the whole frame of the movie is, it opens in this pinball hall, and it's just like life in the city is, like a pinball machine. It's just people bumping into each other, crazy shit happening, really unpredictable, very disgusting, really just kind of like visceral and horrifying. And honestly, that's something that I mean, I didn't love this movie. I'm definitely interested by it and intrigued in going further into Bakshi, but I do, you did kind of pick a good one for me, Michael, because I do feel like I appreciate in animated movies when they acknowledge some of the like latent horror of animation as a medium. Just, I don't know, it's just kind of disturbing to me sometimes to think about how you can just like draw someone and then like make them do literally anything that you want, and you just have this like total control over them. And this movie, I think, really sort of understands that, and it's just like, here are all of these unrestrained nightmares that I've had. And
Yeah, there's some real like body horror in this movie, like
lots of penises getting snipped off, and
or like, am I remembering that there's like a guy who like pogo sticks on his penis?
yeah, and there's like a legless guy. Yeah, and it's also weird because it's like that also feels, you know, so a piece with just like the origins of a lot of American animation. You know, like you know, he hated Mickey Mouse, but you look at something like Steamboat Willie, where you've got like Mickey Mouse turning all of these animals into musical instruments, and it's just like really disturbing, honestly. Just the way that he just like reconfigures the body, and I think that's what's always a little unsettling to me about animation, is just turning like just this total manipulation of the body. But that's also what's fascinating about it. And this movie just like totally runs with that, and bodies are just stretched or in really obese and grotesque, or they're like a rail thin and oddly proportioned. So it's one time, you know, feels very transgressive and very new and of 1973, but it also feels like it has this kind of like undercurrent of maybe earlier forms of hand-drawn animation. But also I was just generally kind of surprised. I don't know. It's like a pretty experimental movie, and it's so strange that this was, you know, something that was released out into the world fairly widely. And that this guy had a big platform for a time. It's so weird. So of the 70s, I think. I don't think that there's really any other time where like vaguely hardcore porn / body horror cartoons would really like succeed at the multiplex. You know, this is some like some Adult Swim shit now for sure. Very strange movie.
I think like an important historical factor too is like Disney as like an animation studio was like firmly in decline at this point, and that kind of left like I think a vacuum to kind of maybe fill out you know, some of the corners of like the possibilities of the animation medium, since like, you know, Walt Disney Animation Studios, I mean, they were still making movies but at a much slower pace, and no one really liked them as much as like, you know, I don't know, like the 101 Dalmatians or something like that a decade earlier. One of the things I think is interesting about this movie too is that it uses like live, like improvised recordings of the dialogue, and then they animate to that. Like I think Bakshi went and like some of the characters that are just kind of incidental characters in the movie that you kind of pass on the street. That was just like recordings on the street that they set to animation, so it's got that kind of like real live wire thing to it. But I'm kind of with you in that, like, I don't love this movie. I was interested to see what you'd say about it, but
yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Like you mentioned that sort of live recording, and I mean that kind of makes it even more fascinating to me because it feels like just another version of a lot of what was going on in American film at that time, with sort of incorporating, you know, documentary and nonfiction techniques. Like, I don't know, just the first kind of example of that comes into my head is something like Medium Cool, which structures this whole frame narrative around real footage of protests at the Democratic National Convention. You know, this is just kind of like another more out there version of that. And I think that's also one of the things that's really intriguing to me about Bakshi as a filmmaker, is just his like very precise and specific interest in language and slang, and like, you know, that's something that has some kind of problematic implications, but I feel like you almost see that play out in the bodies of the characters and how he draws them, where like the speech patterns are almost reflected in the sort of strange movements or strange proportions of these characters. Like I don't know, he just seems to like draw I don't know, I guess maybe it's something about the sort of like the logic of the images too, and how things transition sort of according to the stream logic. But it feels almost like he sort of draws from sound. You know, there's like a musical kind of quality to the sort of free-flowing stream of consciousness rhythm to the animation. I don't know.
Well, on the music, I really like the kind of like jazz, like samba version of the Save Rosemary in Time song. I guess it's like Scarborough Fair.
I always thought that was so cool. Also, I'm just real quick before we get off this, but I'm looking through some of his other credits. And he did paintings for Vanilla Sky.
What?
And he was also originally attached to Blade Runner before Ridley Scott, and then passed it off to Ridley Scott.
That would have been a much different Blade Runner.
And also Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which I can totally see.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Well, Michael,
last one.
You got our last one, and
yeah. Jessica, do you want to introduce anything about this movie? Because you were the one who picked it for me.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, I will introduce Tampopo because Tampopo is one of my favorite movies ever made. And it is a 1985 film directed by Juzo Itami. And I feel like this is like one of those extremely underrated films where I feel like a ton of people haven't seen it. And it's funny because when the Criterion copy came out, it just has ramen. It's like a animated like ramen sequence on the front of it. And I had a lot of people tell me, like, you would love this movie, you're a huge foodie, and you should watch this. But the people who told me that actually never saw it themselves. They were just like, this is a ramen western, so you would totally love this. But nobody would ever watch the film, which I think is crazy, because it is one of the best movies I've ever seen because of how it kind of threads food and sensuality, and how food is this common thread between people. And it's funny because sometimes I feel like people think that Andrew and Momali have similar tastes. There are lots of things that they enjoy that are the same, but the thing is that
we may or may not be the same person.
You may or may not be the same person, but the exception is that, no offense to Andrew, but I feel like Momali appreciates weird and quirky things. And there are times...
I like this movie, by the way.
Andrew, you're such a square. Quit being so square, Andrew.
There are times where I'll watch something silly with Andrew, and I'll watch his face, and he'll, like, kind of smile, but not really. And I'm like, well... That didn't really land with him, but I knew that I had faith that it would land with him.
It's true.
So,
I watched
It's whatever you stone wall.
This is a betrayal.
That's true.
Well, anyway, it did land with me. I like this movie, although...
That's good, because she just said it was like her favorite movie, and that'd been hilarious if you just decided to shit on it.
But I think that, like, so whoever it was that was talking about how you'll love this movie, this is a foodie movie, I had heard that too. Not about me specifically, but that this is like a movie about food and foodie. And what I was thinking is this is going to be like food porn the whole time, where, you watch... people cook delicious food, and I was imagining something like what was that Jon Favreau movie where
Chef.
he was the food
That was
truck?
quick.
Yeah, I was imagining something like that, where like the entire appeal of the movie is like you're watching amazing food being prepared, and that's not in the movie. There's a lot of very delicious looking ramen in this movie. However, this movie is far weirder than I was prepared for. And I really enjoyed that about the movie, because I'm not like Andrew Swafford. I enjoy quirk. I enjoy the weird.
I like this movie. Excuse me.
So the structure of this movie is that, like, so there's like a main plot, which is that there's this woman who owns like a ramen cafe, but she's like not super great at cooking the ramen. and like her business is kind of floundering. And so these two truckers like make a pit stop because they're so hungry. They've been, I guess, reading this book about ramen while they're driving on their route, and so they stop to have some ramen, and they like basically just tell her to her face like, your ramen's no good, lady, but we can help you make it better. Right. And so like as Jessica alluded to, this is called a ramen western, which I didn't catch this beforehand, but I read on Wikipedia that's a play on the spaghetti western, which kind of makes sense. Like there's a lot of movie parody in this movie. So like the main plot is kind of like a western because they kind of get this gang together that's going to like train her to be a world-class ramen chef. And then there's like the rival ramen cafe that they're trying to best and steal all their customers from. It's also kind of like a sports movie, like Rocky. Like there's like a training montage where she's got to like carry pots of water from like one part of her cafe to the other, and it's like playing like kind of like triumphant, training montage music and stuff like that. And so there's like that main plot, and that's like fun and like basically what I imagined the movie was going to be. But that's only like 60% of the movie probably, because intercut with this main plot are these little vignettes that have like basically nothing to do with the main plot, except sometimes they're like people that the main characters have passed like in a scene or something like that. And these vignettes are just full of the weirdest, most transgressive uses of food I've ever seen in my life.
The food sex scene is really out of this world.
Well, there's two food sex scenes.
I've combined them in my head, I guess. What are the two?
Well, so one is like with no context. We're just in a hotel room, and they order room service, and then proceed to have. They don't really eat the food. They proceed to like have sex on the food and with the food, like including like. There's like a really like extreme close up of a nipple that someone like puts a lemon, like squeezes lemon juice onto from a lemon and then salts and then like licks. There's like a tub of whipped cream or something that like the lady just like dips her breast into like a wing.
There's a crustacean, a live crustacean that is placed on a woman's belly button, and then there's like a glass put on top of it, like that scene
so
from
it like
Matrix.
Scurries around on her belly
robot,
and like tickles
shrimp.
Her. Yeah. Okay. So that's one, and I was watching that. I was like, okay, well, that happened, and then two, the second one, which there's no nudity
this one with
in
the
this,
egg?
but this guy, again, they're in a hotel and order room service, and there's an egg. Which I guess there's a raw egg that you can order from room service at this hotel, because he cracks this egg open and like does the little thing where you like kind of spoon the egg yolk between the two shells, so it's like isolated, the egg yolk, and then he like puts the egg yolk in his mouth, and like he and the lady start making out, like passing this egg yolk from one to the other until the egg yolk breaks, and like it's basically sex, but they're close stay on. But so there's like stuff like that, and then you get like really random stuff. There's a guy who goes to the dentist because he has a toothache, and he's like eating food on the way there, and it's hurting because he has a toothache. And he gets to the dentist, and they like take out his tooth, which has apparently become gangrenous. I didn't know if that's like a thing that can happen to a tooth, but I guess it has, and it like releases this horrible smell that like vacates the room, and then the guy just leaves and goes and gets some ice cream, and shares it with the little boy, and it's very, very sweet. Okay, so there's like all these random vignettes everywhere.
5 minutes.
And it's just such a weird and interesting and strange combination, where it's like half anthology film that just all are these weird anthology like little stories about food, and then the other half is like this kind of like pretty conventional like sports inspirational kind of thing where they become their best selves. And I really liked it. I said this on Letterboxd, but I think it's really interesting that like like eating's pretty gross when you get down to like just the objective facts of it. You're just like mashing something in your mouth and then it like slides down your into your belly. And yeah, well,
Oh yeah.
I think about this because the movie ends. Well, one of the endings of the movie, the last vignette we get is this guy gets shot and he's dying, and his dying words are this recipe that sounds absolutely disgusting for yam sausage, in which like you go hunt a boar during the wintertime, and during the wintertime the boar only can eat yams because nothing else is growing. And so if you kill a boar during the wintertime, you take his intestines out and cook them up, and in the intestines are just half digested yams, so it's like yam poop that you eat. And so, like, the movie, like, really highlights just, like, all the gritty, nasty details of eating and fluids. Like, the fluids of, like, food and the fluids of people are constantly like, swishing together in this movie.
It's so fun to me to hear Michael describe this movie compared to how Jessica has described this movie, which, like, Jessica describes it on a Cinematary Review about, like, the joy of food and, like, how it brings people together,
and that's
and like
not
family
inaccurate.
Traditions. And Michael's like, let's talk about fluids. Let's talk about mashing meat with your teeth and sliding down your throat.
But that's like the thing I was gonna say, which I said in the letterbox, is like
Sounds like Basic Instinct.
those two things coexist in this movie, and it somehow doesn't feel dissonant. Like, it all is like part of the same universe, and like the food still looks really good, even though you've just seen it. Like, even in the inspirational, like, cooking, we're gonna make you an awesome chef plot. Some of that stuff is kind of gross. Like, they talk about like making how they make the broth, and they just show all these like animal bits, like pig's feet, and like there's this one part where this guy brings in just like a whole pig's head, like a decapitated pig's head, and the woman kind of like faints because it's just gross and looking at her with dead eyes. But then, like, it's still super delicious, and like the movie somehow like puts in all this weird gross stuff, and like intentionally gross stuff. Like, there's no way. Some of this is cultural. Like, there's a scene in which like this is one of the vignettes where people are learning. There's like this class where they're learning how to eat like basically like a Westerner. Like, how are you gonna have Western table manners? And one of the things is like, well, Westerners hate it when you slurp your food. And the whole movie, people are just like slurping ramen all the time, which is a little bit of a trigger. I made it through, but I'm one of those Western people, I guess. But anyway, by the end of the vignette, everyone's slurping and just like kind of thumbing their nose at that, like, convention, because they realize like, this is so much better if I slurp it, and screw you for your etiquette. And so like, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I mean, some of it's cultural. Like, some of the stuff I found gross, like maybe some of the animal parts are more commonly eaten in other places of the world, and that's fine. But I think some of this is legitimately trying to be like transgressive, and like, we're going to use food in ways that food is not conventionally used, and it's going to be a little icky. So it's got that, but then like it doesn't ruin your appetite somehow. It still is delightful and nice when the woman's ramen shop is like a gigantic success at the end of the movie. And it's very sweet. Well, at the same time, you just saw a guy, bleeding from his gut talking about yam poop sausage. So, like, there's a lot going on here, and I don't know if it all worked for me. Like, there's so many little bits of this movie, and there were definitely times where I was like, wow, I really don't know about this. But I would, like, on the whole, like, it was good, and I really liked it. Thanks for suggesting it, Jessica. It had been on my watch list for a long time, so glad I got to experience it.
Yeah, I just want to explain the egg yolk thing a little bit, because I feel like like people are like, this is disgusting and I hate this scene, but like,
Jessica is subtweeting some friends
they're
right
like,
now.
this is disgusting. It made me cringe.
I loved that scene, but it was disgusting.
I do too.
Gotta
But
say.
I will say, like, if you've ever cooked before in your entire life, it is messy. It is a messy thing that you do, but at the end you create something beautiful. But it is not in any way something that is clean cut and you don't get stuff everywhere. Like, that's what happens when you cook. But as a baker, when you are baking something and you have to separate the egg yolk from the egg white, you cannot bust the yolk once you separate it, because when you bust the yolk, if it gets in the egg white, then you can't whip it and make a meringue. So these two people are doing what one person's hands would normally do, where you have to pass it back and forth without busting the yolk. And to me, it shows something like a sensual activity where two people have to work together in order to not bust the yolk. And I know
So there's something that busts in that scene.
I know that it looks weird and that it is gross to a lot of people.
Damn, sounds like
but
ghosts.
I, in a million years, wouldn't be able to visualize something like that. Like, I would never be able to write something that does that.
It's very cool. It's very cool. And I think that's like, it's very sweet and beautiful in the scene, while at the same time, like, really just being gross. Like, it's like gross on like two levels, because it's like an egg, like a raw egg, which I think are kind of gross anyway. But then also you're doing the thing where you're like swishing it back and forth in each other's mouths, which is like another extra component of like, you know, like that sort of factor. But at the same time, it is this really sweet activity, and like that's like, that scene is like the microcosm of like how this movie works for me, where I'm like, half of it I'm like, wow, that's disgusting, but then the other half is like, wow, that's really sweet and beautiful.
Yeah, every time someone says something about it, I'm like, well, maybe I'm just weird. Because I was, like, wiggling my eyebrows the whole time you were talking about all the sex stuff.
The sex stuff is very cool. Like, I was, the first scene that happened, I wasn't expecting it to happen at all. And I was like, whoa. The second time with the egg, I was ready for more food sex, but that was a food sex I was not ready for. And again, I was like, whoa.
I think more than any, 50 episode trade off movie thing before, this has really illuminated a lot of listeners and people who have listened a long time about where we're at mentally. This one really set a bar. They know where our heads are at now. We are all weird, horny people. bunch of weird, horny people.
Except for Andrew Swafford, who's the most normal square one of all of us.
Yeah, I only like serious, normal things.
Just talking about pussy juice.
Oh, gross.
All right.
Oh,
well, I
hate it.
I'm just saying. I feel like I learned a lot, and hopefully you did too. Along the way, we're all friends. 300 in. Hopefully, I don't really want to watch 300 anymore. So, glad that's.
We have an announcement.
We do, but let's go through the little procedures first.
Yeah.
Facebook. You can find us on social media, baby. We gotta pay those bills. Facebook.com/Cinematary, Twitter and Instagram handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Also, check us out on Patreon, Patreon.com/Cinematary. We'll have a new film theory and chill coming up pretty soon, and hopefully we'll have some nice Patreon exclusive add-ons to our upcoming series for people who are fans of the Young Critics Watch Old Movies series. We have our schedule for that. Thank you to everybody who voted. We appreciate it. It's always a fun time of the year. But let's go ahead and go through our lineup. Ooh. So, for 1920s, we picked two 1927 movies, I guess. For English, we have Seventh Heaven, and for foreign, we have Metropolis. For the 1930s, for English, we have The Black Cat from 1934, and The Story of the Last Chrysanthemum in 1939. Chrysanthemum. And I have time to learn how to say it. In 1939. For the 40s, we have, for English, Hell's a Poppin'. I'm really excited to talk about that because we're all from the South. And so listen to Hell's a Poppin'. It's going to be great. And then for foreign, we have 1948 Spring in a Small Town. For the 50s, for English, we have 1959's Imitation of Life, which thrilled to talk about. And 1957's The Seventh Seal. For the 60s, we have 1965's Bad Girls Go to Hell and 1966's Tokyo Drifter. For the 70s, we have 1970's Husbands and 1979's Stalker. And for the 1980s, we have 1987's RoboCop and 1988's Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. So some first for the for not only the Cemetery Pod, but the Young Critics series with some directors who we like, big name directors who we have not ever talked about in an episode.
Yeah, Verhoeven, Almodovar, Borzage,
Bergman,
yeah, so quite a few.
Tarkovsky.
Some of these countries, Spain, China. We did a little bit of Sweden, but not really.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a nice, interesting series.
Good stuff.
And hopefully we'll have. I mean, we're gonna be kicking it off next week with Seventh Heaven, but hopefully we'll have some guest announcements and stuff coming up pretty soon because. Always a good time to latch on if you haven't listened to Cemetery before. This is not necessarily the episode because you'll just be like, it's a bunch of horny people talking about movies for 2 hours. But on a normal episode, it's just Ash who's horny and it's a little bit more tame. When the whole group, gets infected, what are you gonna do? Well, cheers to 300 episodes and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.